I'm making this video because there is a lot of confusion around the Schengen rules. Um, so I think it's important to start by framing, how visas and things work in general around the world, because it's kind of the opposite of the way people think about it, and this is why they have such a struggle with it. When you're in any country and the authorities, stop you, whether it's at the border or it's inside the country, uh, the question is, what is your right to be here? Why are you here? What gives you the privilege of being in this country? And the answer is, I'm a citizen of this country, or I have a passport and a tourism visa, or school, study visa, or work visa, or maybe I, have a passport from a country, and you have an agreement with my country that I can be here for a certain amount of time. Without a visa. So I have a visa exemption agreement between the country of my passport and you, of your country. And it's important to think about that because visas can be stacked because they're privileges. There's not a rule that says, okay, you can only be in this country for this amount of time and then you got to get the heck out. That's not how it works. It's actually opposite. The rules give you the visa or visa exemption gives you the privilege to be in that country based on whatever those agreements and rules are. And at the end of that agreement, you might have another agreement that, allows you to be there longer. So for example, you might be in a country on a student visa, and then you might get a work visa at the end of it, and those could be stacked, back to back. So the first thing to know when you're looking at the Schengen rules is that lots and lots and lots of countries around the world already had pre-existing bilateral agreements with other countries, and this goes, all the way back to the early to mid 1900s. The Schengen Agreement, the original one, wasn't even signed until 1985. But countries already had agreements that were in place and working and active before that. The primary reason the Schengen Agreement was originally signed was to allow freedom of movement within the countries for the citizens of the Schengen countries, because they might work in one country and live just across the border in another. And so it was allow them to travel and move around easier. But part of that agreement gave some privileges to people that lived outside the Schengen zone to travel inside the Schengen zone under those agreements as well. But the most important thing to understand about this is that the Schengen Agreement did not replace or do away with any of these existing agreements. Those existing agreements are still in force today and can be combined after the Schengen Agreement. So you can use your Schengen Agreement time and then use one of these other visas. So I'm going to go through an example here and show you this. So the European Union Commission had all the countries submit their existing agreements that are still in force today so that people would have a place to go and look to see what countries different countries had agreements with. So I am on the European Union official site here, and there's a document, the list of member states with bilateral visa waiver agreements with third countries, allowing for an extension of the period of stay in accordance with the Schengen Agreement. The important thing to note here is this is an extension of the period of stay from the Schengen Agreement. So the Schengen Agreement is going to, if you have a country or you have a passport from a country that, is part of this, like, for example, the US, the Schengen Agreement gives you the ability to enter the Schengen zone and travel freely between all the Schengen countries for 90 days within a rolling 180-day period. without a visa. It is a visa exemption. So no visa is even involved. You just can show up at the border and enter these countries, and you have the privilege to travel around them or stay in one of them for 90 days per the Schengen Agreement. But at the end of the 90 days, um, you also have countries that may have an agreement that will give you extended time in that country beyond the Schengen Agreement. Again, and I can't point this out enough because this seems to be the part that people have the biggest struggle with. It is an extension of the Schengen Agreement. So here is the document. You can look right on their website, and I'll post a link as well. But in this document, let me actually open up the document so you can see it a little bit bigger here. So in this document, it's a list of the member states with bilateral visa waiver agreements with third countries allowing for an extension of the period of stay of the Schengen Agreement. And again, this is an extension. So the way that this document is laid out is you look for the country that you want to go to, and there's a table for that country, and then it lists all of the countries that it has agreements with. And in this case, this specifically means the passport is from this country. So if you have a passport with, whatever country here, that is the agreement that you'll have with it. So since the discussion in this group tends to largely be around Italy, I'm going to scroll all the way down here and let's find Italy. Okay, so here is Italy. And then if I scroll down to see the list of countries Italy has an agreement with, then I find United States of America because I have an American passport. And I can see that they have an agreement from September 29th, 1948 that grants me 3 months in Italy. And again, remember, this is an extension. So if I was to go into the Schengen zone, whether I just stayed in Italy or whether I traveled around, doesn't matter. I would first consume my 90 days of the Schengen Agreement visa waiver exemption. And once I consume that 90 days, if I got over to Italy, at the very end of it, obviously I need to not exceed the 90 days. But if I get over to Italy, because I have an American passport, I could then get 3 extra months in Italy. Alternatively, I might have just entered and stayed in Italy for my 90 days of Schengen time and then stayed an additional 3 months. So I could, in fact, because I have an American passport, stay in Italy for 6 months straight. Now, at the end of this time, if I wanted to reset my Schengen time, then I would need to completely exit the Schengen zone at the end of this 3 months. So I've now been in Italy 6 months, and I could leave the Schengen zone and go to any country outside the Schengen zone. And each day that I'm out of it, I'd accumulate 1 day back. Or so generally people leave for an entire 90 days, and then they can come back for an entire 90 days. But remember that there are other countries in the Schengen zone that, as an American passport holder, I also could get time in. So let's say, scroll down here to the Netherlands, for example. So here's the Netherlands. And if I scroll down the list here, we've got the United States of America, again, because I'm an American passport holder. There's an agreement from August 15th, 1947. And as an American passport holder, I can get 90 days in the Netherlands. So this means that I can go into the Schengen zone, spend 90 days, whether it's in Italy or wherever, traveling around, consume my 90 days of Schengen time, then go to Italy and spend 90 days there, or I could have just stayed in Italy for 6 months straight. Then I could fly to the Netherlands and, as an American, get 90 days in the Netherlands. And then I could continue doing this in various countries and the Schengen zone and essentially do this perpetually. The time in each of these countries also has, the same thing. It's 90 days within 180 days. So I'd have to be out of that country for 90 days before I could go back. But this really allows me to bounce around between a lot of countries and the Schengen zone without ever actually leaving the Schengen zone, and I could be completely in compliance. Again, though, my Schengen zone 90-day exemption wouldn't restart until I actually left the Schengen zone. So, that's fine, but I could still continue to do this. Now, why does that matter? Well, the reason it matters is because, for example, if I'm scrolling down this list, let's say Austria, for example. If for some reason I wanted to go to Austria, the Schengen time would allow me 90 days, if I had 90 days of Schengen time, would allow me 90 days in Austria. And when you scroll down this list, notice this alphabetical here. Notice there is no agreement between the United States and Austria. So the only way I could enter Austria as an American citizen is if I'm doing it using my Schengen time. So that's the reason why I might want to exit the Schengen zone and, let my Schengen zone time start refreshing because maybe I want to go to Austria. Or I believe Germany is another one. Slovakia is definitely one as well. Looking for Germany here. There it is. So there's Germany. And if you notice, in Germany, there's no agreement with the United States. So again, the only way that I could enter Germany under a visa exemption would be through my Schengen time. So that's why I might have to reset my time. Also, Greece, see, there's no agreement for Greece, so I wouldn't be able to enter without Schengen time into Greece. Spain does have an agreement, so here's Spain. So I could bounce to Spain as one of my countries, here again with the United States of America. Ordinary passports, I would get 90 days. France has an agreement, same thing, I get 90 days there. So you need to look at this list and understand which countries we have an agreement with, because those are the countries that you could bounce, around between and still stay inside of the Schengen zone. And the only reason that you would actually need to start refreshing your Schengen zone time is if you wanted to enter one of the countries that we didn't have an existing agreement with. So this document is really good to have. One other thing I would also mention is that a lot of people think, oh, I got away with it. I was there, in the Schengen zone for 60 days and I didn't get in trouble. Well, maybe that's because you exited through Italy. Or, one of the countries that we have an agreement with, and they looked at the time and they said, no worries because we have an agreement. You didn't get away with anything. They just assumed you were in the country. One of the questions that I'm sure that you're thinking of, or that you you may think of later, so I'll just throw this out there now. Theoretically, as it is now, when you enter Italy or Spain or wherever in the Schengen zone, of course, they automatically start counting down your Schengen zone time unless you present them with another type of visa, like a student visa, work visa, whatever. They automatically begin counting down your Schengen time. Could you bounce around between these countries and actually exceed these time limits and not get caught? You could, sure. I mean, it probably would be fairly easy to do. However, at any point, if at any, border patrol or whatever, if there's any kind of issue or something, they could, start asking you to prove we need to see the hotel receipts or car rental or, whatever to prove that you were actually in these countries for these days, and that could get complicated. But if you're just, going to Italy for 90 days and then the Netherlands for 90 days and so forth, and you keep your hotel receipts, like, for example, together, your Airbnb receipts, then that should be an easy thing to do. But this is how the rules actually work. And then so circling back around to the confusion that many people have with the Schengen zone agreement is they think that the Schengen zone agreement is some kind of rule that says you can only be in the Schengen, a Schengen zone country for 90 days and a 180-day period. And that is the opposite of the way it works. It gives you the privilege of being in a Schengen zone country for 90 days out of 180 days. And that sounds like, a small thing. It sounds like it's almost the same, but it's not. It's actually opposite. And when you really understand that, and kind of step back and think about it, you see that understanding how it actually works really changes everything. And then all of these rules become much more clear and easy to follow. So, as you can imagine, it would be incredibly difficult for immigrations and custom to track your movements around the Schengen zone, especially considering that within the Schengen zone, you don't have to go through border control when crossing borders. So, it's really important that you keep track of your movements with your receipts and whatnot. And it is up to you to demonstrate, where you've been, which should be easy to do as long as you've just got, your receipts for your travel or meals or whatever. Um, but this is the reason why, when you contact a consulate and you say, hey, what are the rules in the Schengen zone, or, with traveling in the EU or whatever? Well, you're contacting the consulate for a specific country. They can only answer the rules for their own country. And to be honest, most people just, as difficult as of time, as some people have had, understanding this, you can imagine the consulate certainly doesn't want to have to try and go through this explanation every time someone asks. And the person answering the phone, may not even know. They may not even understand it, especially if they're from the EU and this isn't a problem to them because they're a member already of a Schengen zone state. So they're just going to take the easy path and say, oh yeah, follow the Schengen rules. Because they don't want to get a call that you're stuck at the border and you did the wrong thing and you didn't follow these rules. But these rules aren't complicated. Just look at the document, verify that you know which countries have agreements, look at your travel plans, or if you're winging it, just make sure that you're staying within your time limits within the various countries and transiting correctly. And you shouldn't have, you really shouldn't have any issues. But going back, again to the thing at the very beginning, if you wanted to go to Italy and stay 90 days for Schengen and then do your extra 90 days in Italy, you can do that. You could leave Italy. Your time would start refreshing. If you went outside the Schengen zone for 90 days, then you would actually be able to come back and do the same thing again. So you have a lot more flexibility and privileges to use these than people realize. So I hope this information is helpful to other people who have been confused by this. And the final last question is, have I experienced this? Yes, I have. I have done this. I'm aware of this. A lot of people will go through border control and think, oh, I got away with it. Well, you didn't get away with anything. You just didn't know the rules. So you didn't know that you were in compliance. Border Patrol does know the rules. So you were in compliance, and that's the reason why you didn't have any problems.